I walked into my 20-year high school reunion driving my beat-up Honda Civic, thinking I'd finally show everyone I'd made something of myself, but instead I faced the same vicious bullies who tormented me decades ago. They pointed and laughed at my old car like we were teenagers again, but what they didn't know was that my husband was about to arrive with a convoy that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria, and I need to share with you the night that transformed my life forever. But to understand what happened at that reunion, I have to take you back to where this journey really began, in the hallways of Riverside High School, where I learned that cruelty has no limits, and kindness feels like a distant dream. Picture a girl with hand-me-down clothes that never fit quite right, shoes with worn-out soles held together with determination and duct tape, and a backpack stuffed with library books, because they were my only escape from reality. That was me at 17. Navigating 4 years of what felt like psychological warfare disguised as education. Every morning I'd wake up with knots in my stomach, knowing I had to face another day of whispered insults, deliberate exclusion, and calculated humiliation. The worst part wasn't even the obvious bullying, though there was plenty of that. It was the subtle ways they made me feel invisible, like I didn't deserve to exist in the same space as them. When I'd raise my hand in class, they'd roll their eyes and make exaggerated sighs. When I'd walk down the hallway, they'd step aside dramatically as if I carried some contagious disease. During lunch, I'd sit alone while groups of popular kids would glance over and whisper, their laughter cutting through me like glass. The ringleaders of my misery were twin sisters, Cassandra and Veronica Ashford. These weren't just your typical mean girls. They were psychological warfare specialists who had perfected the art of making someone feel worthless without ever getting caught by teachers. Cassandra was the strategic one, always planning elaborate schemes to embarrass me, while Veronica was the executor, the one who delivered the crushing blows with a smile that could fool any adult into thinking she was an angel. Their family owned the largest manufacturing company in our small town of Millbrook, which meant they had influence that extended far beyond the school walls. Their father sat on the school board, their mother organized all the major social events, and everyone knew that crossing the Ashford twins meant crossing the most powerful family in town. This gave them an untouchable quality that made their reign of terror even more devastating. I remember one particularly brutal incident during my junior year. I had been working for months on a science project about renewable energy, staying after school every day, pouring my heart into research because I genuinely loved learning. The night before the presentation, Cassandra somehow got into the classroom and destroyed my entire display. Not just damaged it, completely obliterated it. When I arrived the next morning to find my months of work in pieces, I broke down crying right there in front of everyone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when Veronica walked over, handed me tissues with fake concern, and loudly announced to the class, "Oh, Victoria, accidents happen. Maybe next time you should be more careful about where you leave your things." The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, actually praised Veronica for being so compassionate. I had to present my project from memory, stumbling through explanations without visual aids, while the twins sat in the front row smirking. That incident taught me something crucial about the world. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who appear the kindest to everyone else. The Ashford twins had mastered the art of public sympathy while privately destroying lives, and I was their favorite target. The social isolation was suffocating. In a school of 800 students, I felt like I was living on a deserted island. I'd eat lunch in empty classrooms, spend breaks in the library, and walk home alone while everyone else made plans for weekend parties I'd never be invited to. The loneliness was so intense that sometimes I'd talk to my reflection in the bathroom mirror just to hear a friendly voice. My parents, bless their hearts, were working 2 jobs each just to keep our family afloat. Dad worked construction during the day and stocked shelves at the grocery store at night. Mom cleaned houses in the morning and waited tables at the diner in the evening. They were exhausted, stressed about bills, and honestly had no bandwidth to deal with their daughter's social struggles. When I tried to explain what was happening at school, they'd give me advice like, just ignore them, or focus on your studies, not understanding that this was psychological torture, not just teenage drama. Our family car was a 15-year-old Honda Civic with mismatched paint, where Dad had tried to fix the rust, a muffler that announced our arrival 3 blocks away, and air conditioning that only worked when the weather was already cool. I was mortified every time my parents had to drop me off at school events, watching as other kids arrived in their parents' luxury SUVs and brand new sedans. The car became another source of shame, another reason for the popular kids to whisper and point. But here's what those bullies never understood. When you're pushed to your absolute breaking point, you have two choices. You can crumble completely, or you can develop a strength that runs deeper than anything they could imagine. Every cruel comment, every deliberate exclusion, every moment of public humiliation was forging something unbreakable inside me. I was learning resilience in the hardest possible way. I threw myself into academics with an intensity that bordered on obsession. While other kids were at parties and football games, I was in the library researching colleges, applying for scholarships and planning my escape from Millbrook. I knew that education was my ticket out, my chance to build a life where the Ashford twins and their opinions would be completely irrelevant. I studied until my eyes burned, wrote essays until my fingers cramped, and maintained a perfect GPA because I understood that grades were my weapon against a world that seemed determined to keep me down. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The guidance counselor, Mr. Patterson, was the only adult who seemed to recognize what I was going through. He'd call me into his office sometimes just to check on me, and he was the one who helped me navigate the college application process. He saw potential in me that I couldn't even see in myself, encouraging me to apply to schools I thought were way out of my league. He'd say, "Victoria, you have something special. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." During my senior year, something shifted. I'd grown tired of being invisible, tired of shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I started speaking up in class discussions, contributing ideas that impressed teachers and occasionally even classmates. I joined the debate team, where my years of defending myself had prepared me well for intellectual combat. I wasn't becoming popular, but I was becoming visible on my own terms. The Ashford twins noticed this change and didn't like it one bit. They ramped up their campaign against me, spreading rumors that I was cheating to get good grades, that I was weird and obsessed with school because I had no social life. They convinced other students that I thought I was better than everyone else just because I had academic success. But their words had lost some of their power over me. I was beginning to see a future beyond Millbrook, beyond their influence, beyond their ability to define my worth. Graduation day was bittersweet. I was valedictorian, which felt like the ultimate vindication. But I also knew I was leaving behind the only world I'd ever known. During my valedictorian speech, I looked out at the audience and saw the faces of everyone who had ignored my pain, everyone who had participated in my isolation, everyone who had watched cruelty happen and done nothing. But I also saw Mr. Patterson beaming with pride, my exhausted but proud parents in the front row, and a few teachers who had believed in me. I spoke about resilience, about the power of education to transform lives, about the importance of kindness in a world that often seems determined to crush compassion. I didn't mention the bullying directly, but everyone knew what I was talking about. When I finished, the applause was thunderous, and I saw something in people's faces that I'd never seen before. Respect. College was my rebirth. At State University, 3 hours away from Millbrook, nobody knew my history. I wasn't the weird girl with the old car and the secondhand clothes. I paired them with a comfortable lavender sweater that Alexander gave me for my birthday, one that's incredibly soft and makes me feel confident and relaxed. I added my trusted denim jacket, the same one I'd worn throughout college and couldn't bring myself to replace even though it shows clear signs of wear. On my feet, I chose my most comfortable white sneakers, shoes that have walked thousands of miles with me, and still provide the support I need for long days on my feet. Instead of carrying one of the expensive designer handbags that Alexander had purchased for me, I grabbed my faithful canvas tote bag, the one that's been my constant companion for years, and carries everything I might need during a day out. I left all my expensive jewelry at home except for my simple wedding ring and small pearl earrings that belonged to my grandmother. Looking in the mirror before leaving the house, I saw exactly what I wanted to see: a normal 27-year-old woman heading out for some casual shopping. I looked approachable, relaxed, and completely unremarkable, which was perfect for gathering genuine information about how the staff treated customers they perceived as ordinary. I had absolutely no idea that this perfectly normal outfit would soon make me the target of the most shocking and degrading treatment I'd ever experienced in my life. Prestige Palace is Alexander's masterpiece, a four-story monument to luxury and elegance that took 3 years to design and construct. The building features imported marble floors from Italy, crystal chandeliers that were handcrafted by artisans in France, and carefully curated collections from the world's most exclusive designers. Every detail was personally selected by Alexander to create an atmosphere that balanced luxury with warmth, sophistication with accessibility. He wanted customers to feel like they were entering somewhere special, but not so intimidating that they'd be afraid to touch anything or ask questions. As I walked through the gleaming glass doors, I should have felt proud of what my husband had created. Instead, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. The moment I stepped inside, conversations seemed to quiet around me. I could feel eyes assessing my appearance, measuring my clothes against some invisible standard, and finding them lacking. Other customers, dressed in their designer outfits with their expensive accessories, glanced at me with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to obvious disdain. The sales staff, who should have greeted every person who entered with enthusiasm and helpfulness, instead watched me with suspicious, unwelcoming eyes. I tried to push past the uncomfortable feeling and focus on my mission, but it was impossible to ignore the judgment that seemed to hang in the air around me like a thick fog. I walked slowly through the main floor, admiring pieces that Alexander had personally selected during buying trips to fashion capitals around the world. There was a stunning emerald silk blouse that I remembered him being particularly excited about, and a collection of evening dresses that had taken months to source from exclusive ateliers in Milan. As I reached out to feel the fabric of a beautiful navy dress, a sharp voice behind me made me freeze in place. "Excuse me, are you looking for something you can actually afford?" I turned around to face a tall woman with perfectly styled platinum blonde hair who appeared to be in her mid-30s. She was dressed in an immaculate black business suit that probably cost more than most people spend on rent in several months. Her makeup was flawless, applied with professional precision, and she carried herself with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from believing you have power over other people. Her name tag read Cassandra, store director, and the smile on her face was the most condescending expression I'd ever encountered. "Oh, hello," I said, forcing myself to sound friendly, despite the obvious sarcasm dripping from her greeting. I was hoping to look at some of the dresses, actually. Cassandra's laugh was sharp and cruel, loud enough that other customers turned to watch our interaction with obvious interest. "Honey," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the sales floor, "do you have any idea where you are right now? This isn't some discount department store or outlet mall. This is Prestige Palace. Our least expensive item costs more than your entire wardrobe appears to be worth." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain calm and composed. "I understand this is an upscale store," I replied quietly, maintaining my dignity despite her obvious attempt to humiliate me. "But I'd still like to browse your collection if that's acceptable." When I said I loved him too, I meant it with every fiber of my being. This man had seen me, truly seen me, and chosen to love what he found. After years of feeling invisible and worthless, that validation was everything. We talked about marriage, about building a life together. James was supportive of my career ambitions, encouraging me to take risks and pursue opportunities. When I got a job offer from a prestigious consulting firm in the city, he immediately started looking for apartments near my new office. He never made me feel like I had to choose between love and success. The proposal came 2 years later, during a weekend getaway to a cozy bed and breakfast. Nothing extravagant, just the two of us, a beautiful sunset, and a heartfelt speech about how he couldn't imagine his future without me. The ring was lovely but modest, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. When I said yes, I wasn't just accepting a proposal, I was accepting a partnership with someone who truly understood and valued me. Our wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family. My parents were so proud, tearful as they watched their daughter marry a man who clearly adored her. James's parents welcomed me warmly, treating me like the daughter they'd never had. Standing at that altar, exchanging vows with this incredible man, I felt like I'd finally found where I belonged. What I didn't know was that James had been keeping something from me, not out of deception, but out of a desire to be loved for who he was rather than what he had. You see, James lived so simply that I never questioned his modest lifestyle. He drove that regular sedan, lived in a comfortable but unremarkable apartment, and worked from a home office doing what he called technology consulting. I had no idea that he was actually the founder and CEO of a company that had revolutionized data security systems, making him worth more money than I could have imagined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the day that changed everything. The day a simple, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox with familiar fancy script that made my hand shake as I opened it. 20 years had passed since I walked across that graduation stage, and I thought I had left Millbrook and all its painful memories behind forever. I had built a successful consulting career, married the love of my life, and created a world where the opinions of high school bullies couldn't touch me. So when that reunion invitation arrived, my first instinct was to throw it directly into the trash and pretend it never existed. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity about how my former classmates had turned out. Or perhaps it was a desire to show them that the girl they had tormented had not only survived but thrived. James found me staring at the invitation that evening, lost in thought. "What's that, sweetheart?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I stood in our kitchen. "My 20-year high school reunion," I said, leaning into his warmth. "I'm thinking about going." James was quiet for a moment, and I could feel him processing this information. He knew bits and pieces about my high school experience, though I'd never shared the full extent of what I'd endured. Some wounds are too deep and too personal to fully expose, even to the person you love most. "Do you want to go?" he asked carefully. "I think I do," I admitted. "I think I need to prove to myself that those people have no power over me anymore." James turned me around to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "Victoria, you don't have anything to prove to anyone. You're successful, you're loved, you're an incredible woman who has overcome so much. But if going will help you find closure, then I support you completely." "Would you come with me?" I asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "Of course, if you want me there. But are you sure you wouldn't rather face this on your own? Sometimes we need to prove our strength to ourselves first." That's the thing about James that I loved most. He had this way of understanding exactly what I needed, even when I didn't fully understand it myself. He was right. This was something I needed to do alone, at least initially. I needed to walk back into that world as Victoria the successful consultant, Victoria the beloved wife, Victoria the woman who had transformed her pain into power. The weeks leading up to the reunion were filled with a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety. I found myself working out more, eating healthier, preparing not just physically but emotionally for this confrontation with my past. I bought a new dress, nothing too flashy but something that made me feel confident and professional. I practiced conversations in the mirror, imagining different scenarios and how I might respond. James was incredibly supportive during this time, listening when I needed to talk and giving me space when I needed to process. He never once suggested that I shouldn't go or that it wasn't worth the emotional energy. Instead, he reminded me daily of my strength, my accomplishments, and my worth. "Remember," he said on the morning of the reunion as he helped me with my necklace, "you're not the same person who left that town 20 years ago. You're stronger, wiser, and more successful than most of them could ever dream of being. And more importantly, you have people who love you for exactly who you are." The drive back to Millbrook in my reliable Honda Civic was surreal. The car had been with me for 8 years, a practical choice for someone who valued dependability over flash. It had never occurred to me to be embarrassed by it. The engine ran smoothly, it got excellent gas mileage, and it had taken me on countless adventures with James. But as I drove through the familiar streets of my hometown, I found myself seeing it through the eyes of my former classmates. Millbrook hadn't changed much. The same small downtown, the same local businesses, the same feeling of being trapped in time. I drove past my old house, now painted a different color with a new family's toys scattered in the yard. I drove past the high school, which looked smaller and less intimidating than I remembered. Everything seemed diminished somehow, as if my memories had inflated the importance of this place. The reunion was being held at the Millbrook Country Club, which had always been the epicenter of the town's social hierarchy. As I pulled into the parking lot, I was immediately struck by the array of luxury vehicles. BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, even a few Ferraris and Porsches. My modest Honda looked decidedly out of place among these symbols of success and status. I sat in my car for a moment, taking deep breaths and reminding myself why I was here. This wasn't about impressing anyone or proving anything to people whose opinions shouldn't matter to me. This was about closure, about facing my fears and walking away stronger. But as I stepped out of my car, I heard the snickering immediately. "Oh my God, is that Victoria Patterson?" The voice was unmistakably Cassandra Ashford, though she went by Cassandra Ashford Williams now, if the reunion booklet was accurate. I turned to see her approaching with her sister Veronica, now Veronica Ashford Kingston, and a small group of our former classmates. They looked exactly as I'd expected, perfectly preserved by expensive beauty treatments and designer clothes. Their expressions, however, were achingly familiar, the same mixture of amusement and disdain that had haunted my teenage years. "Look at that car," Veronica said loudly enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "Some things never change, do they?" The group erupted in the kind of laughter that immediately transported me back to those horrible high school hallways. Several people had their phones out, clearly preparing to document what they saw as entertainment. I felt that familiar heat rising in my cheeks, that old urge to disappear or run away. "Victoria, honey," Cassandra said with fake sweetness, "we were just admiring your vintage vehicle. How wonderfully practical of you." "Still shopping in the budget section, I see," Veronica added, looking me up and down. "Though I have to say, you've definitely improved since high school." Their backhanded compliments were expertly crafted to sound supportive to any casual observer, while delivering maximum psychological damage to their target. It was the same technique they'd perfected 20 years ago, and apparently they'd never felt the need to evolve. More classmates were gathering now, drawn by the spectacle. Some looked uncomfortable with what was happening, but no one stepped forward to intervene. It was high school all over again, with the same bystanders and the same cowardly silence. "So tell us, Victoria," Cassandra continued, "what have you been up to all these years? Still buried in books somewhere?" "I'm a management consultant," I said, proud that my voice came out steady and professional. "Oh, how lovely," Veronica replied with theatrical enthusiasm. "And are you married? Kids?" "I'm married," I said simply. "Wonderful. Is your husband here? We'd love to meet him." There was something in the way she said it that made it clear they expected to meet someone as unremarkable as they perceived me to be. Someone who would confirm their assumptions about my life and my worth. "He's not here tonight," I said. "Oh, what a shame," Cassandra said with mock disappointment. "What does he do?" "He works in technology." The sisters exchanged a look that I recognized immediately. It was the same look they'd shared before delivering their cruelest blows in high school. They were setting up for something big. "Technology," Veronica repeated thoughtfully. "Like computer repair? How perfectly suitable." The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could feel the familiar sensation of being the center of unwanted attention. People were whispering, taking pictures, clearly enjoying the entertainment. I was the same scared girl all over again, frozen by the spotlight of public humiliation. "You know," Cassandra said, her voice carrying across the parking lot, "it's just so inspiring how some people are content with simple lives. No ambition for anything grand or impressive, just comfortable mediocrity. There's something beautifully humble about arriving at your 20-year reunion in the same kind of car you probably drove in high school," Veronica added. "It shows such consistency." The laughter was getting louder now, and I could see phones being held up to record what was clearly going to become social media content. The hashtags were probably already being composed in their minds. I felt 20 years of growth and confidence crumbling around me like tissue paper. That's when I heard the sound that changed everything. It started as a low rumble in the distance, growing progressively louder. Heads began to turn away from me toward the country club entrance, where a convoy of vehicles was approaching. Not just any vehicles, but an impressive procession of luxury cars that made the reunion parking lot look like a used car dealership. Leading the convoy was a pristine white Rolls-Royce Phantom, followed by a midnight blue Bentley Continental, a silver Aston Martin DB11, and bringing up the rear, a stunning red Ferrari 488. The engines created a symphony of power and precision that had everyone in the parking lot staring in awe. The vehicles pulled into the circular drive in front of the country club with choreographed precision, their engines purring as they came to a stop. For a moment, there was complete silence except for the whispered speculation of onlookers trying to figure out whose cars these could possibly be. The driver's door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and James stepped out. But this wasn't the James that anyone would have expected based on my description. This was James in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His hair was styled by someone who clearly knew what they were doing, and he carried himself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding respect. The other vehicles disgorged their passengers, James's security detail and personal assistants, all impeccably dressed and moving with the practiced efficiency of people who managed the affairs of someone very important. James scanned the crowd until his eyes found mine, and his face immediately softened with the same love and warmth I'd fallen in love with. He walked through the stunned crowd as if they were invisible, his focus entirely on me. "Sorry I'm late, darling," he said as he reached me, cupping my face in his hands and kissing me deeply in front of everyone. The board meeting ran longer than expected, and then there was an issue with the Frankfurt acquisition that needed immediate attention. The kiss was everything I needed in that moment. It was love, support, protection, and validation, all wrapped into one perfect gesture. When he pulled back, his arms slipped around my waist in a movement so natural and protective that it made my heart skip. "Everyone," I said, my voice now strong and clear, "this is my husband, James." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the asphalt. Cassandra and Veronica looked like they'd been slapped, their expressions cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror as the implications began to sink in. That's when someone from the crowd gasped, "Wait, is that James Morrison? From Morrison Technologies?" A woman I barely remembered from high school had her phone out, frantically Googling. "Oh my God, that's James Morrison. He's on the cover of Fortune magazine this month. He's worth like $3 billion. The whispers started immediately, a crescendo of recognition and disbelief rippling through the crowd. People were pulling out phones, frantically searching for information, confirming what seemed impossible to believe. "Morrison Technologies just bought out 3 major competitors this year," someone else added. "He's one of the youngest billionaires in tech. Didn't he just donate $50 million to educational initiatives?" Another voice chimed in. James, to his credit, handled the attention with perfect grace. He shook hands with people politely, but I could see the steel in his eyes when he looked at Cassandra and Veronica. He knew exactly what had been happening when he arrived. "I hope everyone's been treating my wife well," he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to make it clear this wasn't really a question. "Victoria is the most brilliant, compassionate, and successful woman I've ever known. I consider myself the luckiest man alive to have won her love." The transformation in the crowd was instantaneous and nauseating. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me, to congratulate me, to reminisce about our wonderful high school friendship that had never existed. People who had watched me be tormented were now claiming they'd always known I was special. But it was Cassandra and Veronica's reactions that were most telling. They were trying to backtrack, claiming their earlier comments had been misunderstood, that they'd just been playfully teasing an old friend. Their voices had taken on a desperate quality as they realized they'd just publicly humiliated the wife of one of the most powerful men in the country. "Victoria, we were just having fun," Cassandra said, her perfect composure finally cracking. "You know we've always been proud of you." "We had no idea about James," Veronica added quickly. "We would never have." But James cut them off with a look that could have frozen fire. "Ladies," he said with deadly calm, "I've spent enough time in business to recognize exactly what was happening here. What I witnessed wasn't friendly teasing. It was deliberate cruelty designed to humiliate my wife in front of an audience." The crowd was completely silent now, everyone recognizing that they were witnessing something significant. Camera phones were recording everything, but no one was laughing anymore. "You know what I've learned in business?" James continued, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "The people who try to tear others down are usually the ones most insecure about their own failures. True success doesn't require diminishing others to feel important." Then he turned to address the entire crowd, his arm still protectively around my waist. "Victoria has accomplished more in her career than most people ever dream of. She's helped dozens of companies transform their operations, saved thousands of jobs, and changed entire industries for the better. She volunteers her time mentoring young women from underprivileged backgrounds, helping them find their strength and pursue their dreams." The pride in his voice made me stand taller. But it was what he said next that truly changed everything. More importantly, she has more integrity, kindness, and genuine strength than anyone I've ever met. If anyone here made her feel less than the extraordinary woman she is, then you missed out on knowing someone truly remarkable. And that's when something clicked inside me. Standing there with James's love surrounding me like armor, I found my voice. Not the scared voice of the 17-year-old girl who had been terrorized in these same streets, but the voice of the woman I'd become. Cassandra. Veronica, I said, looking them directly in the eye. 20 years ago, you did everything you could to make me feel worthless and invisible. You succeeded for a while. But you know what you actually did? You taught me that my worth doesn't come from other people's approval. You taught me to recognize genuine kindness when I found it. You taught me that true strength comes from surviving things that are meant to break you. The parking lot was so quiet that my words carried to every person there. I learned that success isn't about making other people feel small. It's about lifting others up, about using whatever power you have to make the world a little bit better. It's about choosing kindness even when you've been shown cruelty. I could see some of my former classmates nodding, and I realized that my words were resonating with people who had their own stories of surviving high school, their own memories of cruelty and exclusion. I'm not angry with you anymore, I continued, and I realized as I said it that it was true. I'm grateful. Because everything you put me through made me stronger, made me more compassionate, and helped me recognize real love when it found me. The apologies came then, fumbling and desperate. Cassandra and Veronica tried to explain themselves, tried to minimize what they'd done, tried to rewrite history to make themselves look better, but their words didn't matter anymore. I'd already won the moment I stopped caring about their approval. Other classmates approached us throughout the evening, some offering genuine apologies for their silence 20 years ago, others sharing their own stories of struggle and growth. I met former teammates who had become teachers, helping kids who reminded them of themselves. I talked to students who had been bystanders but had spent years regretting their inaction and were now anti-bullying advocates in their own communities. As the evening wound down, James whispered in my ear, "Ready to go home, beautiful?" We walked to the Rolls-Royce hand in hand, and I realized that the scared girl who had driven here in her Honda Civic no longer existed. She'd been replaced by a woman who understood her worth, who had found her voice, and who knew that true victory isn't about revenge, it's about refusing to let other people's cruelty define your story. The next morning I woke up to find James on the phone in his office, setting up a foundation in both our names to fund anti-bullying programs and provide college scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds. "Everyone deserves to feel safe while they're learning," he said, pulling me into his arms. "And everyone deserves to know that their current circumstances don't determine their future possibilities." And that's when I understood that the real victory wasn't showing up my bullies or even finding love with an incredible man. The real victory was learning to see my own worth and using my experiences to help others find theirs. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.